Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is April 16th, 2014. It's 9 a.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Palm Coast City Council. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz?
Here.
Vice Mayor DiLorenzo?
Here.
Councilmember Ferguson?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember McGuire?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the April 1st council meeting and the April 8th council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without exception. Objection, whichever. Agenda item number 2, proclamation recognizing April 13th or April 19th as Public Safety Telecommunications Week. Accepting for the Sheriff's Department. I bet we got some telecommunicators. Sounds good.
Whereas emergencies can occur at any time, disasters require law enforcement, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency transpires, the prompt response of law enforcement officers, firefighters, and emergency medical personnel is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our emergency responders is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained by the Public Safety Telecommunications from citizens who telephone the Flagler County Communication Center. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, serving as the single vital link between the public and law enforcement officers, firefighters, and emergency medical personnel, by monitoring activities via radio and providing information that ensures safety for everyone. And whereas public safety telecommunicators of the Flagler County Communication Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients, and whereas each communications employee has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism as they performed their job in the past year. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the City of Palm Coast, Florida, that the week of April 13th through the 19th, 2014, be designated as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week to honor the men and women whose diligence and competence keeps all the citizens of our city and county safe. Signed this 15th day of April, 2014, City of Palm Coast, Florida, John Netz, Mayor. Thank you for your service and all the work you do, and you have anything to say?
I do. I just want to thank the City Council and the city staff for recognizing the hard-working 911 dispatchers that work in this county and for the city. It's a difficult job, and my staff, I have 18 staff, and they work very hard to keep the citizens safe. Stressful. I tell people all the time that 20 years ago when I started, I had hair, and now I have none.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But on behalf of Sheriff Manfrey, I thank the City of Palm Coast Council and the staff for recognizing our hardworking 911 dispatchers.
Thank you.
Again, I would like to echo what Bill said. Thank you so much for recognizing our communication workers. They have a very difficult job. They have to wear very many hats. They have to be counselors and also direct our fire and ambulance and our law enforcement. But also they, at times, save lives. In one instance, one of our supervisors, Janice Cacavalli, actually walked a grandmother through life-saving techniques for her granddaughter had fallen into a pool. And we were able to save that baby's life. So thank you for all you do, Wendy, and all the staff. And thank you, City, for being great customers. And that's the way we consider you. It's not always easy dealing with your chief, but we somehow make it work. I didn't give him too much of a shot yesterday. Well, thank you very much for the recognition, and we appreciate it.
Photo op? Look at you. Sheriff? You want me to move that one agenda item up? That'd be great. Okay. Thank you very much. Council, we've had a request from the sheriff if we could at least move the discussion, if not the action, of agenda item number 7 to this point. The sheriff would like to be here for that, but he has another appointment. So is there any objection, or by consensus, let's go to agenda item number 7 on the consent agenda, which is a resolution approving the transfer of funds from the Police Automation Fund to the Flagler County Sheriff to purchase video cameras. Mr. Landon, tell us about that one.
Mayor, City Council, this is another cooperative effort between the city and our sheriff's office. We have a fund that's dedicated for police technology. It actually comes from a portion of traffic citations that goes through the state, and the state historically has sent a few of those dollars our way for very specific purposes, and that is improving law enforcement technology. Recently, we've used those funds for defibrillators in all the sheriff's vehicles, and this latest cooperative effort with the sheriff was lapel or uniform cameras, video cameras that will actually video each deputy's activities, because oftentimes it's a he said, she said, and I've personally seen this many times when I had police departments under me, the benefits of these cameras, and also from the investigation and the actual prosecution of having something on video lots of times helps. So this is basically a grant proposal. The sheriff's office will actually purchase, own, maintain all the video cameras. We are just providing the funds to help pay for those video cameras if you approve this item.
Any council questions? Sheriff, any comments you'd like to offer? We will hold the actual action item to our consent agenda, but I wanted to get the presentation now while you're here.
Well, thank you. First of all, I appreciate the city manager's help in this regard. He has a real dedication to technology improvements, and this will be a huge one. Also, I'd like to recognize Chief Beadle for his work in procuring this. Wherever these have been implemented, the lapel cameras, they have dropped citizens' complaints dramatically for two reasons. First of all, 90% of citizen complaints tend to be unfounded, so you get less of those. And for those law enforcement officers who do sometimes get overly aggressive in a situation, they're on camera, those tend to go away too. The most a famous instance is we had an instance in Daytona Beach where a former NFL player was putting a knife to his girlfriend when the SWAT team broke in. It was all filmed. He was shot 10 times, actually. Did not die, but those officers were cleared within 24 hours. There were no lawsuits against the city simply because the camera showed that her life was in danger at the time they did it. So I think this will be a great advance for law enforcement, and I think it'll be a great advance for the citizens. And it's also a cost-saving items because our deputies tend to have less time in a courtroom when you have DUIs videotaped or domestic violence situations videotaped. It's hard to argue with a video. So I think this is going to be a great advance for law enforcement. And we are rolling it out slowly. We started with our traffic unit, and to make sure we have implemented it correctly and trained our deputies correctly. And the same thing, we'll implement it on a rolling basis so everyone is trained properly and our procedures don't get ahead of our training. So again, I appreciate you dedicating these dollars for this. I think it'll be a great boon for law enforcement in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. As I said, we will take this up under the consent agenda item. Agenda item number 3, proclamation recognizing April 15th as National Service Recognition Day. Receiving the proclamation, Susie Gamblin from Flagler Volunteer Services.
Hi. Good.
Proclamation. Whereas service to others is a hallmark of the American character and central to how we meet our challenges. And whereas the nation's mayors are increasingly turning to national service and volunteerism as a cost-effective strategy to meet the city needs. And whereas Senior Corps address the most pressing challenges facing our cities and nation, from educating students for the jobs of the 21st century and supporting veterans and military families to preserving the environment and helping communities recover from natural disasters. And whereas Flagler Volunteer Services has a Senior Corps, RSVP, retired senior volunteer program that needs priority community needs by working in Flagler schools and with the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, Citizens on Patrol by building capacity with other nonprofit organizations and by supporting disaster services. And whereas national service participants serve in more than 70,000 locations across the country, bolstering the civic, neighborhood, and faith-based organizations that are so vital to our economic and social well-being. Whereas national service participants increase the impact of the organizations they serve, with both through their direct service and by recruiting and managing millions of additional volunteers. And whereas Senior Corps volunteers demonstrate commitment, dedication, and patriotism by making an intense commitment to service, a commitment that remains with them in their future endeavors. And whereas the Corporation for National and Community Service shares a priority with mayors nationwide to engage citizens, improve lives, and strengthen communities, and joined with mayors across the country to support the Mayor's Day of Recognition for National Service this month. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Mayor and City Council of Palm Coast, Florida, do hereby recognize April 15, 2014 as National Service Recognition Day in the City of Palm Coast and encourage residents to recognize the positive impact of national service in our city, to thank those who serve, and to find ways to give back to their communities. Signed this 15th day of April 2014, City of Palm Coast, Florida, John Netz, Mayor. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
A little photo op?
Want to do a photo op? And I just wanted to say thank you so much for the recognition and for having us here and for all of your support throughout the years. We could not have the volunteers doing the work that they do in our community without the support from the city. We have over 1,400 volunteers that are community-driven volunteers, as well as 3,600 school volunteers. 300 of those fall into our national service category, and they served over 29,000 hours of the 140,000 that all the volunteers as a whole did. Working in things like public service with the Citizen on Patrol program, as reading mentors in our schools, conducting our RSVP giving store, doing capacity building, which is recruiting volunteers for other nonprofits and government agencies, and helping with the disaster services, which we were happy to help with the tornado this past December. So we are here, there, and everywhere, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Be an interesting little arithmetic exercise. If you took those thousands of hours of volunteer service and multiplied it by the minimum salary, to think of the tremendous savings that this brings to our community, to our county. Thank you so very much, Susie. Agenda item number 4. Just in case you thought budget was a once-a-year kind of item, this is a presentation of the current year-to-date budget review, which actually begins the budget cycle for the next year. Mr. Landon?
I think you said it all, Mayor. We do this every year where you're going to start seeing Mr. Quinn and Lena on a regular basis now as we move through the basically a year-round budget cycle, but this is the beginning.
Chris,
of
isn't there something else on April 15th that's of significance?
Yeah.
Is this a
I
coincidence?
can't really think of it at the moment, but yes. Good morning, Mayor and Council. This is our first in our series of annual presentations relating to the fiscal year 2015 budget preparation process. This is our timeline that we've kind of presented before, but we're going to take it through each one of our presentations as we go ahead and accomplish each section. So far to date, since January, we've prepared the first quarter performance and budget review, which was presented to City Council a few weeks ago. In February, the financial audit report for the previous fiscal year was presented to City Council by our auditors. In March was the annual progress report and citizen survey results by the Strategic Action Plan team and Denise, as well as the revised 10-year infrastructure plan. We're currently in April. Today we're working on the presentation of the year-to-date budget for fiscal year 14 through March 31st, our 6-month point. We're working on our second quarter performance evaluation and reviews with the departments in the city manager's office, and also really the budget preparations, the detailed budget preparations by departments begin in April. And then May and June, we have a number of other presentations coming up that we'll talk about further. Again, July is one of the bigger heavy lifting months where we have to set the maximum millage rate. August, we finalize the budget, and of course, September, we have the final public hearings. So where we started, this is a synopsis of our current year budget. Total, not including interfund transfers, a little over $137 million, and this is presented by fund. And this is just the general fund itself, just under $27 million. Of course, the largest single revenue source here being ad valorem or property taxes. This is our revenue source pie graph. Always interested to get comments from citizens on this. Our biggest single revenue source is charges for services, the area in blue. That would be things like stormwater fees, water sewer fees, building permit fees. And our actual property tax, the portion of our property taxes, though a very important portion, represents only 11% of our total budget. And this is expenditures by function. The physical environment, transportation, and debt service, which is on the left, kind of the pink area, that's over 60% of the total budget, represents investment in infrastructure. Water, sewer, maintenance, operations, streets, and the debt service to purchase and repair those items. So over 60% of our total budget just goes into physical assets of the city every year. So where are we now? Our current revenues and all of our major funds are tracking right where we expect them to be on budget. No surprises so far. The general fund, water, wastewater fund, solid waste, and stormwater fund, all the revenues are where we'd expect them to be at the 6-month point of the year. One area that we're seeing an increase, a significant increase in revenues over what we budgeted, which I think everyone probably expects at this point, is related to building and development. All of our revenues related to development are ahead significantly over budget to date. All the impact fees, zoning fees, planning fees, building permit fees, every one of them are tracking ahead due to the actual volume of business.
How much ahead, Chris?
Probably 25% ahead at this point. Here is quarter 1 versus quarter 2, just building permit revenue. This is actually cumulative. So what you're really looking at, it's kind of a little hard to see, but the gap between the blue and the red bar you can see is growing. And what that's basically showing is that our revenues are growing a little bit more exponentially than what we anticipated on the budget. Again, with blue being 2013 actuals and red being the 2014 actuals. And in terms of numbers of permits issued versus 2013 and 14, and this is just total permits. Again, you can see that gap is growing, and that's cumulative through March 31st. So quite a bit of development going on right now. These are our
other tax revenues. We're actually going to have a specific presentation just on these tax revenues and their usages. I'd like to start by, I'll just go from left to right, our state revenue sharing, the blue being our actual, the orange being our budget. One thing to keep in mind with all these revenue sources is that they are affected seasonally. Even though it's through March 31st, we've only received revenue from January collections. So for instance, January sales taxes, January fuel taxes. February and March, especially for sales taxes and fuel taxes, are usually very good months because of all the travelers. Those numbers really aren't reflected here. So even though a few are behind, it's not really anything, it's not a large dollar amount, it's not anything to get concerned about. And I don't anticipate any real issues right now with the state revenue sharing and the local fuel tax, the first two that are a little bit behind budget. The small county surtax is actually coming in ahead of budget, and that goes along with the statistics we've seen recently, because that's related to sales tax receipts. And again, POMCO saw a fairly significant increase in taxable sales year over year, and that's driving the increase in the small county surtax. The half-cent sales tax, again, comes from the state portion of the sales tax, pretty much right where we expected it to be. And then the communication service tax, that one is lagging behind, and I really think that's going to continue to lag behind. There's some legislation currently being considered at the state that would have an effect on this also. That revenue source has been slowly eroding, but we'll definitely take a closer look at it in future presentations. So expenditures, overall the expenditures look great to date. Mostly overtime is where we've had some issues. We had 10 divisions that had some overtime issues, primarily related to those 4 different general categories as to why the overtime was high, either due to staffing vacancies, of course the tornado played an effect, general operating needs, or the increase in building and development. I don't see any of those being an issue right now because overall the personnel charges within the budget are well within the budget as of 6 months.
Chris, the staffing vacancies, does that include the intended new hires for the building inspectors?
No, that's vacancies of people who were here at the beginning of the fiscal year that left for whatever reason.
And were not replaced?
Well, they're in the process of being replaced. It's just that the overtime was to cover while they were being replaced.
I'm still confused. If I'm looking at an expenditure, how is a vacancy an expenditure if I'm not paying someone?
Well, this is only overtime. We're only looking at overtime here.
Okay.
So yes, we would have had the savings in the salary, but we would have spent more in overtime.
Maybe I could help here a little bit. We asked the departments, okay, what causes the overtime? And these are the categories they come back with. So these are not expenditures. These are the cause of overtime occurring.
Right, right.
Which it raises an issue that I've raised before. When we hit the recession, we did significant staff reductions, and that makes perfectly good sense. There's less work for staff. But now we're at a point where your building permits, all the things that staff does, there is more work for them to do, and I want to be certain that we are staffed appropriately. Well, you may save some money on staff vacancies, but you significantly impact citizens.
Correct.
Permit time, response time, so on and so forth. So it's something we need to watch very, very carefully.
It is high on the radar. I know in the development area in particular, there are a couple of positions in planning, zoning, building inspector positions right now, building permit tech positions that are all actively being searched to be filled as we currently speak. But the key, the key here, the key point I really wanted to make was overall the personnel costs are coming in at or below budget in total. Our capital projects, this is really handled through the infrastructure team, looks at the capital projects citywide. All the projects currently are meeting the budget expectations, those budgets that have been presented to City Council as part of the project approval. And we continue to update the project timelines every quarter. Everything is, pretty much where we expect it to be at this point. There haven't been a lot of changes to the project timelines. But from a financial standpoint, the capital projects are all on budget, doing well. The biggest one, of course, Palm Coast Parkway 6 laning is just getting underway these last few weeks. Kind of in our What's New section, thought it would be good for the public and for the council to see our kind of a new part of our web presence, part of our new website. This is our kind of reports and documents section of the web page. We have all kinds of financial information out here for the public to take a look at. In addition to tooting our own horn a little bit with our awards and recognitions, we have a whole listing of financial reports, including monthly reports that we get from the Golf and the Tennis Center, reports from the bond rating agencies. Our budget at a glance is out here. The quarterly evaluations, performance measure reports, all of the financial reports that are presented to City Council are archived out here for the citizens' easy access on our webpage. Of course, we mentioned again the budget at a glance. This is one of our new documents. It's been very, very popular. It is available on the website. There are printed copies around the city facilities for citizens. One of our big happy announcements is Lena has been chosen to participate in the GFOA budget award process as a reviewer, which is an honor, where she actually gets to review other cities' budgets and make comments as to whether they deserve to get the budget award or not. And I just really want to give her a pat on the back for that, because she's come a long way in a short period of time to be able to really be able to do that. Recently, we put out our long-term financial planning document. This is really just a guide document of how we go about our long-term financial planning. We'll actually be spending more time with council this year as part of our budget process to talk about some long-term financial planning for our operating funds. We do that a lot with our capital funds, such as the 10-year capital lookout, but operating funds, such as the general fund operations, utility operations, we're going to be doing a little bit more of that this year. And again, just a reminder of our quarterly review process ongoing. The outer circle being kind of our annual process with the budget, the annual progress report, and the strategic action plan. And then inside the circle being our quarterly reviews by finance, the departments, and the city manager. Again, we're working on the second quarter process right now. And then again, our What's Next calendar. In May, we'll have our fund review presentation as part of our budget primer and our long-term financial planning presentation. Both of those will be presented to council in May. June, we'll talk about those other tax revenue sources I had mentioned earlier and their uses, as well as the property tax primer. Then July, we get right into all the different budget workshops, again, leading to the public hearings in September. And that's all we have today.
Council question, Mr. McGuire.
Chris, since we're going to be talking about the budget at the city council meetings, the glossary that you put together last year, it's time to print some more. I've taken that to various parts of northern Florida to activities that I've been involved in, and other cities that I've been to have just raved about it and thought it was just a terrific thing.
Yeah, and that was a great help for us, Mr. McGuire, when you gave us that advice. And we're actually adding that now to all of the documents that we're creating, that we work on. We're adding a glossary section for key terms in addition to the general glossary that we publish. So
our next meeting, there'll be a pile of them over there next to the agenda.
Certainly.
Good.
Mr. De Lorenzo.
Chris, one thing we hear often during budget time is, I didn't know about that, or how can you make that decision? You haven't even seen it. But you've just given us this very long, extensive calendar of all the opportunities for public viewing and public participation. Can we make sure that we have that calendar available on the web as well, so people can find that and know where they can find out all the information they want about the budget, and so they'll know everything that we know.
Sure, yeah, no problem at all. And after today, this presentation will be up there on that section of the website for anyone to look at. Yeah,
Great.
certainly.
Mr. Lewis.
Chris, a couple of things. Those pamphlets you put out, I think they're very informative, and somehow we have to find how best to get them out to the public. Like Mr. McGuire, I take a lot of them myself and take them to meetings that I have. But there's so much information there, and it's a shame that the public, I know it's on the website, but unfortunately, a lot of people just don't go on the website to get that information. So they're surprised when they do get it at a meeting. So it's very informative. The other thing is that we're doing the strategic review now, and there are a lot of things in there that will impact our budget.
Yes.
Somehow, I think we need to find a way to get more citizens' participation, because one of the things that the survey showed was that people say they know very little about government, our government, and that we're not doing a great job. Well, we're doing a great job, but somehow I think those pamphlets is a way of getting the message out. So, good job.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Keep up the good work, both of you. Agenda item number 5, resolution approving the revised official interlocal agreement with the Supervisor of Elections for the city's 2014 elections. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, we're hoping this brings this saga to a conclusion today. Virginia, I think, did a great job in finally working with the Supervisor of Election to address the two major concerns City Council had with the interlocal agreement that was presented to us by the Supervisor of Elections. Made a couple of changes to it. One of them made it clear that she could only require a change in room during emergencies, and then the other one was if we had any type of unexpected addition to the ballot, that we would be allowed to do that. She's requesting that we do an addendum to the agreement, which is not a big deal. So with those two changes, we are recommending approval and allowing us to move forward with placing the city 2 seats that are up for election this year on the county ballot, and get this behind us.
Council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting from the public. Anyone in the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 5, please come up to the podium, give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, go back to council. Any further questions, comments, or is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 6, appoint 5 applicants to serve on the Beautification and Environmental Advisory Committee. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this committee is actually a little unusual in fact that all 5 members come up for reappointment at the same time. They are 4-year terms. As usual, the resolution establishing this committee strongly recommends that there be a member from each council district, at least 1 member from each council district. You actually have 6 applicants. 3 of them are currently on this advisory committee and have asked for a reappointment. 2 of them will require a vote of 4 council members because they have already been appointed 2 terms. One of them would be Mr. Partlow, and the other one Mr. Jones. The third person who is currently on the board or advisory board has only been appointed for 1 previous term, so a simple majority would reappoint Mr. Kapkar. The process that hopefully you have the ballot in front of you, is mark 5. And if you will mark 5 out of the 6, then we will count those, and anybody who either gets 3 or 4 or 5 votes would be appointed. If there's someone who doesn't, then we'll have to do it again.
It's a secret ballot.
We have 5 votes for Jones, 5 votes for Capcar, 2 for Leary, 4 for Partolau, 4 for Sakolowitz, and 4 for Zieb, sorry.
Does that, everybody meets the minimum requirements?
Yes.
So would you, who are the 5, please?
Jones, Capcar, Partolau, Sakolowitz, and Zieb. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that.
See it?
Is there a motion to confirm the appointment of Jones, Capcar, Partolau,
So moved.
Salkovitz, and Seib?
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Again, just an opportunity to thank the volunteers who give of their time, their efforts, their energy, and their experience to the betterment of our city. Thank you all. Agenda item number 7. This brings us to the consent agenda, items 7 through 9. We had the presentation on item 7 earlier. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the agenda? But before we do, then provide the opportunity for the public. If anyone would like to speak on agenda items 7, 8, and 9 before council chooses to remove them, if they choose, this is your opportunity.
Good morning. My name is George Mayo. I live here in Palm Coast. My thoughts were, with these cameras, would it be possible, or has it been thought
So
of?
is this only consent agenda items, or is this general?
Well, this is concerning number 7, item
Okay.
number 7. Possibly giving a camera or 2 to the fire department. I know more and more departments around the country these days are using them. Possibly one for whatever the chief, what do they call it, the shift commander or something, because sometimes in fires, it can become intense, and a camera may be useful to them. So might we think of possibly of having donate or giving, a camera or 2 to whatever the fire department may desire or need or whatever, and you could work that out. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Motion on consent agenda 7 through 9. Anybody wish to remove anything? No. If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries that objection. Chief, my understanding is the police automation fund is for police functions, but if that gentleman's suggestion, and it makes very good sense to me, something you might want to consider in your budget. Maybe take out one fire truck and put in a couple of Pell cameras. Might balance out. Something to think about.
I like that idea.
Your Honor, along those lines, if I may, would hope that the sheriff would equip the SROs in school with these lapel cameras, because it seems like every year there's some kind of a conflict in a school between a student and the SRO or a teacher, and of course it's not caught on camera at this time. I think it would be a good idea were it to be so.
I can't speak for the sheriff, but I believe his intent is ultimately to provide these to all officers. So maybe maybe that should be a priority. Traffic officers first, then SRO.
Well, you'll remember, Your Honor, a year or so ago when there was a big controversy about whether an SRO should use a taser on a student that was unruly, and there was a lot of attention given to it and a lot of media coverage of it. But, you know, all you had were people that gave opinions and, well, I thought it happened this way. I think this would remove that.
Very good. Thank you. We took a vote on it, did we? Yes. Yeah, okay. This brings us to the public participation portion of the meeting. It's the opportunity for the public to speak on any item not on today's agenda. Please come up to the podium, give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. I called up a friend of mine from Seminole Woods, and he had eye surgery, so he couldn't come in here. But he wanted me to let you know that y'all are doing a hell of a job on in Seminole on the pathway. And he was glad to see them come back, but he knew the reasons why they couldn't work how they was working. But my friend Bert Hines, he said when his eyes are better, his feet will walk. Right now, he has to depend on his secretary to drive him around, and she gets a little perky. Y'all, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Fred. We appreciate the compliment. Next speaker.
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. I had a problem with my trees. And Carol did a tremendous, she came to my house, did a tremendous job, telling me what to cut, what not to cut, what to fertilize. And I have to tell you that, so that, you know, recognition goes where it's supposed to. Now, one more question. Let me ask you, since we've been a city, right, we've always compared us we always went, well, you know, this city does it this way, and this city does it this way. Do any of the other cities say Palm Coast does it this way? And does Palm Coast hold their, you know, we hold all these other cities above us. But I was just wondering, does anybody, you know, compare themselves with us? So what I'm getting at is, let's give all our people enough money so that when Deltona says, you know, look at Palm Coast, and this way we don't lose any of our people, because we got the greatest and they're the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Next speaker. Next speaker. So you don't approach the podium. We'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. But first, Jack, thank you very much for your compliments. I know our city staff appreciates it. If you look, you know, if we had a trophy case where we could display some of the awards that our city gets, we get recognition locally, nationally, internationally for our staff. You've heard about the budget awards that we get year after year. Most cities, many counties don't get that kind of recognition. You hear about our utility department. Again, they've placed first in competition. Someday we'll have a trophy case, and someday we will be able to display the awards that our city staff receives and our city receives.
Video?
Video awards.
Our video awards, I'm going to miss somebody for certain, but someday we will have that trophy case, and someday we will be able to properly give public recognition to the work that all our city staff does. To the extent that we're a wonderful place to live, work, and play, directly attributable to the staff that we have. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Lewis.
if I may, recently we all met with the staff with regards to the progress report that they're putting together. And in there is the citizen survey results. I don't know, I missed the meeting, I think, but somehow I think the council needs to take a very serious look at that survey that was done by the national organization that did it, because there are some comments or concerns in it that bothered me. And one is because I found that the low percentage of citizens who know what we're doing. And that's frightening, because people come here and they throw stones at us and tomatoes and everything, and then they walk away and say, gee, I didn't know that. Well, that's because we do a lot of things, but we're not doing a great job in PR. We have to get our stuff out there to the public so they can see it, because it's just bad that when you look at a survey, the low percentage of people who knew about city government and what we are doing. It's very startling. So I don't know if we want to, the council wants to look at that as a workshop or something like that, but there are things in that survey that we really should look at.
I think probably one of the most effective things that we can continue to do is our Citizens Academy.
Oh, fantastic.
Invariably, after people complete that, they describe a whole new understanding and awareness of what being a city of our size and complexity is all about. So encourage. Tell you a quick funny story about Citizens Academy, without mentioning any names. I got an email this morning from a couple. One is in her 60s, the gentleman is in his 80s. They were participants in the most recent Citizens Survey, Citizens Academy, and sat together and went through the whole academy and have decided, based on what they heard, that this is where they're going to live, and they've asked me if I would conduct their marriage ceremony this Thursday. So Citizens Academy has some other wonderful outcomes also. So I will be officiating at a wedding Thursday for two of our most recent graduates.
Wonderful.
Hope they clear the mud off the road up there.
Okay, this brings us to discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. No, nothing? Mr. Lewis?
Voice mine.
Mr. DiLorenzo?
I got a call from a citizen in Seminole Woods about some litter at the bus stops, which are at Seminole Woods and Ulatern. And he says it's not the kids, because it's in the afternoon. It's the parents when they sit there with their cars to pick them up, and after that there's a bunch of trash. So we just did that path, and I'm sure this isn't too easy to coordinate, but perhaps if the garbage cans were located closer to where the I'm asking a lot of our common man here, but if the garbage cans were located closer to the bus stops, perhaps that would help with the trash. This gentleman goes around, picks it up. He says the garbage can is, he thinks is about 200 feet, because he uses the garbage can when he cleans up his neighborhood, but he'd be happier if the people would take care of it themselves.
We are actually looking at placing those on existing paths where they don't exist. I'll pass that along to the team as to try to coordinate it so that it is closer to a bus stop. And then future ones, when we do new paths, we'll try to make sure it's at a bus stop. I think that's a great idea. I really hadn't thought of that. I usually think of that being for people using the path, but...
We usually look for distance, right? We want to keep them kind of equally spaced out, but maybe if we can plan it around a bus stop, that will help.
Yeah, good idea.
That's all.
Other than to recognize the holiday season for everyone, Passover, Easter, whatever occasion you celebrate.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Lewis?
Bite of the apple?
You want another bite of the apple? Okay.
Something just came to mind, which I saw in the survey, and Mr. Adams might like this. The people answered the survey and indicated the fact that Palm Coast didn't have the best water in the area. And I'm saying, where have they been, really? Somehow, when we do our academy, our classes, we have to pass out samples of water so we can get that message over.
I'll drink to that.
What was it, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Palm Coast won the first in the state taste test for water? I mean, clearly our water meets all of the EPA standards.
It wins
It's pure,
awards
it's
every
clean,
year.
it's this, it's that, but when you win a taste test, that's also pretty good.
I got to add that
good
lots of
bourbon.
times we see that survey go up and down depending on when's the last time we did a rate increase. And every time you do a rate increase, the quality of the water seems to go down. So,
Okay, discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Just a brief report. Last council meeting, I believe it was, you approved a proposed resolution of the one lawsuit involving Palm Coast Plantation. I'm pleased to announce that the board of directors of that association approved that resolution, so that's one down. So just want to make sure you're aware of that one's done.
Great. Thank you very much. Discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
just one little announcement schedule. We are closed this Friday for the holiday weekend, except for obviously emergency services. And then I'm going to just put a teaser out right now. The state Small Business Development Center put out their statistics, annual statistics as to the different centers and the job they're doing and the return on investment. It's preliminary right now, but the numbers are looking excellent for Palm Coast and our BAC. Plus the speakers for this year's BAC Expo have been confirmed, and those are quite impressive regional and national speakers. So just put a teaser out. Stay tuned. We'll do some news releases. We'll get out official information about some of the great things going on at the BAC. Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vice Mayor.
I move we adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation.